One of the reasons that a bespoke suit lasts so long, and is therefore a good investment, is the extent to which it can be altered. Bespoke tailors leave extra material, inlay, in the seams, and actually in more seams than ready-to-wear tailors do, to make this possible. But what's alterations are easy, what's hard and therefore expensive, and what's just impossible? And frankly, how fat can you get and your suit still accommodate you? Today we're going to be talking to Davide Taub, the head cutter at Gieves Hawkes, about the alterations that he does here. Hi Davide.
Hi there.
Nice to see you. Thanks
you.
for spending the time today.
Thanks for coming by.
So we're going to talk about alterations on tailoring today. How many alterations do you get coming into the Gieves bespoke department?
Well, I couldn't put a number on it, but it's not a big part of what we do, but it's something that we do expect because we encourage our customers to understand that there's longevity in the garment, so these things will come.
Okay. And what kind of things are people coming for? Is it when they change weight, for example?
Well, primarily, I guess it's two categories. It's either people changing weight or if there's been damage to the garment. So those are the two sort of areas where most alterations come into play. It's very, very rare that there'll be a real restyling for aesthetics in that sense.
Yeah. And do people ever come in with like an entire wardrobe? They've ordered like 30 suits over the years, they want to get them all changed?
I mean, this happens and it's like, it's one of those necessary evils really. It's great when you have good customers who order a lot, but inevitably at some point you kind of expect that it will come back at some, to be able to make these adjustments. And that's, really, body changing, weight, and also creating garments that are quite figure hugging or body conscious. Then that's the sort of, you could say, the downside of it. But then the upside of having bespoke is that they're made to be altered. So
so you have that possibility. And do you think people realise that when they're commissioning a bespoke suit, that they have that potential for alteration?
Yeah, I mean, I should hope so. I mean, quite often you get customers that we haven't seen for a long time bringing back alterations and you wonder where they've been. But certainly when we have a new customer, and part of the selling process is to make them aware of the investment of having a handmade bespoke suit. And it's not just a suit that's going to go out the door and we say goodbye, but we're trying to build up a long-term relationship, not just with the customer but with their garment. So, and also they're having lots of fittings as you're creating that first garment.
That's a good point.
So they're able to see not only the adjustments that we're making as we're creating that first suit, but actually the functionality of what that extra cloth that we leave inside and what it can do.
Okay, fine. Yeah, so they see that inlay in the seams and so on and realise therefore that a lot of changes can be made. Okay. And what are the most common alterations? It's basically presumably taking in or letting out the side seams on a jacket and the waist on a pair of trousers when you're losing weight, is it?
I would say so. It is just minor adjustments to the waist of the coat waist and the trouser waist. And I'd say also fairly common is because a lot of the cloths that we use are very luxury cloths, so they can be a little bit on the delicate side. But that's okay as long as the customer is aware of it and keeps on kind of looking after the garments and seeing if there is any sort of light wearing or holes developing, say particularly in the fork of the trousers. So for that to come back, for us to refork, that's quite common as well. So it doubles the life of the suit for us to be able to do that. And it's a very invisible, simple adjustment to make.
So actually on the jacket we have here, I think you can see, this is sort of at a basted stage, I guess, you can see the inlays have been left in the various seams,
Yeah, this is a good opportunity to see where the extra cloth is left inside the garment. The customer will be aware of it because, like this jacket, it's at the fitting stage and it's under development. And all of that extra cloth is left into the garment apart from the front edge. So this front edge is left to just the seam, so it's the only part of the jacket that can't be adjusted. But apart from that, you'll see extra cloth at the bottom of the jacket for lengthening or shortening. That cloth is also used when you're adjusting the balance of the garment. So if someone loses weight or puts on weight, the balance of the garment needs to be adjusted, and that's done through the shoulders. So we actually have extra cloth through the shoulders as well, which also means that we need extra cloth through the sleeve and on the collar
as
too.
well.
So all these elements are taken apart and put back together when there's a very big adjustment like that to be made.
So that point on balance for a second, that's when someone loses, say they're gaining weight, so they're going to lean slightly backwards, right, because there's more weight on the front. So the back of their jacket then has to be shorter. and the front has to be longer to kind of keep that balance right on the jacket.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
And that's quite a big alteration to be made, but it's worthwhile if you're making big, reductions or extensions in garments. And then, of course, the vertical seams that run in the back of the side body and in the centre back. So there's probably about 3 inches or more that you can take in or out through the width of the garment.
Let's now talk about the different types of adjustments you can do on a jacket to start with, because a lot of readers always ask me how much can they get adjusted and what can they adjust? Can they change the length of the jacket, for example, or is it just more simple things that are possible? So maybe if we take this jacket as an example, let's run through first for things that are very easy to do. So we talked about the waist, for example. You can take the waist in, you can take the waist out quite easily, correct?
Yeah, I mean, if it's a garment that belongs to a customer, then like we were saying before, the most common alterations are to do with the weight movement. So it would be through the waist. So if we spin it round, the centre seam and the side seams here are where you can let this jacket out or take it in. And within reason, you could be making adjustment as much as possibly 3 to 4 inches either way. Because this is usually a garment that customers been wearing, we don't tend to be needing to change, length of sleeves and things like that, because that's something that's not really going to change so much.
Could you change the length of the sleeve? Like, for example, if they're passing on to a next generation or something, how do you go about doing that?
Well, this is it can be. So there's usually it depends, how the garment's been made, but it could be as much as 2 inches or more left in terms of changing the length of the sleeve.
So you can make that longer by using that, and you could take out one of the buttonholes, for example, because the top one's often not working, isn't it?
Yeah,
so
quite often.
Take that out.
But actually, if it's a plain cloth, some of the, so if you wanted to shorten the sleeve, it can be done from the top. Okay. So that's another option.
A plain cloth, because if it was a check or something else like that, then you might interrupt how the checks are matching up.
Yeah, exactly. So there's always some kind of clever option that people, the tailors can sort of think in order to make the right decision and what needs to be done. So
those are the kind of easy alterations. And in terms of what's hard, you talked about anything basically involves the shoulder, I guess, is going to be quite tricky, right?
Yeah, I mean, anything where you have to involves what I would call real tailoring. So if it's just a case of, lengthening jackets and sleeves and things like that, that's pretty basic. But anything where, say, a collar needs to be taken off or a sleeve needs to be taken out, because whatever gets taken out needs to be put back in again. So that's actually part of the making process. So it's less to be seen as an alteration, but, some real, tailoring work that needs to be done.
So say from a style point of view, for example, they want to change the style of the shoulder and go from more of a rope shoulder, like say I have or you have, to something much more natural like this. That's quite a big piece of work, right?
It is, but these are things that are still possible. Yeah. So whether you wanted, to change the expression of the shoulder, or say if you wanted to, add shoulder pads or take shoulder pads away, these adjustments can be made.
Okay. Shoulder pad must be quite hard, because suddenly, actually, the whole side's going to drop at that point, right? As well, you've got to pick it up on that point.
That's right. So it could well be that you need to take the shoulder part, take it in, but then because of that changes the shape of the armhole, so therefore the shape of the sleeve needs to be adjusted too.
Okay.
And then that could affect the length of the sleeve.
Yeah. Okay.
So
these are all. These are all things that are possible, but they're going to take time. They're going to be expensive, and they're going to be difficult to do. As you say, like real tailoring. I'm surprised you said that the length of the jacket was relatively easy to do. Presumably, if it's, you've got the excess there, but if you start changing the length, then the relative position of the pockets and the buttonholes is going to be tricky, isn't it?
You are right, actually. Although in principle it's easy to shorten and lengthen, but it could throw the balance in terms of the proportions of the garment to make either pockets look like they're just in the wrong place. They're either too low or too high. And actually, funny enough, also the run at the front may need to be compromised as well. So
because you've got this, you can't make this bigger, right? So suddenly, if it's longer, this is going to be more cut away almost, right? Exactly.
So where you see the curve, it's not really possible to have any inlay at this section. So the inlay starts where the curve essentially stops.
Yeah.
So in order to kind of lengthen the jacket and have a nice, coherent run, you may need to kind of chop away a little bit and then come through.
I see. Okay.
Like I say, it's not impossible, but just needs to be kind of approached knowing that.
And so the pockets, for example, they're cut into the garment, right? So you can't move the pockets unless it's a patch pocket. Maybe you could move that. And therefore, if you're lengthening the jacket, everything is suddenly going to look slightly higher proportionally, right?
Yeah.
So I guess there's a little bit of tolerance there where you're happy to do that a little bit, but if you did too much, the whole jacket's going to look off from your point of view.
I would say so. I think there's always, some tolerance in terms of, what the end result you're trying to achieve and what you're willing to accept. So,
okay.
But in all, that's a discussion that we have with the customer just to make sure they're aware of that.
Okay. And I guess if you're shortening it, that's slightly easier because you're just cutting away at that front edge, right, rather than trying to add to it. So it's ever so slightly easier.
Yeah, you got that.
Okay, right. And then what sort of alterations are basically impossible? I mean, for example, if you wanted to change this as a 3-button, if you wanted to change that into a 2-button, is that impossible? You're going to have to start completely remaking the front edge, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, anything really, I guess, in principle that touches with the front edge is quite a big alteration to be made, and I'd say almost impossible because you're really interfering with the integrity of the garment. So, like you say, if someone wants to change the button stance, or say, for example, if the garment is too big, so much so that really not enough can be done through the side seams to make the adjustment through the front. In some cases, if it's very big, it can be done, but really it's never going to be a totally satisfactory alteration to be made. You won't see a new garment, you will see a garment that's been adjusted.
And just compromise is a good word, I think.
Yeah,
isn't it?
A compromise. But then I guess, you pay your money and make your choice. You know? And I remember when I was a lot younger, I used to buy suits from vintage shops and markets and that and take them to local tailors to get adjusted, and I had no idea whether something fit me or not. That wasn't my concern. It was just I wanted a suit. I saw a suit that I liked and then would take it to the tailor to adjust. I'd get a horrified look on their faces knowing that what I was doing was not going to be good for the suit, but they would do it anyway, and I'd walk out with happy that I had a suit that I liked.
What kind of changes do you want to make then?
I mean, literally I'd be buying suits that are way too big for me, so they'd have to take it in so much that I'm sure it must have twisted the coat inaudibly and take the trousers in so much that the hip pockets were meeting in the middle. But I didn't care, and none of my friends, or when I was going out, no one noticed, because that's not what people did back then. So I think there's a balance, and that's a fun thing to do, but I would suggest maybe to go to a Savile Row tailor in the time that we take in order to make those sort of adjustments, and I'd say it wasn't really worth it to do. But for a fun piece that you thought, you wanted to buy something vintage, which is a great thing to do, play, experiment, and sort of, I guess, learn from that.
Yeah,
so,
I guess, and this is a Savile Row is making to a different level, so there's much more work involved in putting it together. And also, now it's really, unlike an alteration tailor, you're making something where you're happy to have the Gieves bespoke label and your work go out as part of that, right? So it's got to be not too compromised in terms of the style, still be close enough to what you would have originally done.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And one more thing that occurs to me, I guess, another thing on the front edge is changing. Some people ask about changing a double-breasted to a single-breasted. I mean, that's going to mean completely remaking that front edge, isn't it? And also the collar, because the collar controls the tension of how the front rolls as well.
That's right, tough. Yeah. I mean, it's never to say nothing's necessarily impossible, but it's whether it's a satisfactory thing to do. Yeah. Okay. And so to change a double-breasted into single-breasted isn't that simple, actually. So, like you say, so many things have to change. And, notwithstanding the fact that you have to take the facings off, you have to then recut the front, all the construction and the structure underneath has to be changed as well. Yeah. Then putting the lapels back on and new collar. I mean, you're basically making a new coat. Yeah. So at some point you think, should we just make something new and accept this coat is what it is?
Yeah. One last thing as well, which is very hard to do. People sometimes ask about lapels. Can you change the width of the lapel in or out, or also change it from a notch to a peak and vice versa?
You think you could, and it'd be easy, but there's one particular thing or two that really stop that from being as easy as you think, is actually the buttonhole there. Right. So having that buttonhole means that actually if you wanted to make it narrower, then you're pretty restricted. Yeah. If you make it wider, the buttonhole might just seem like it's a bit out of place. It might not worry you so much. If it was a peak lapel, then the buttonhole is in a different angle. Yeah. So actually, if you turned that into a notch, even if that was possible, then that buttonhole would end up looking like it's a bit out of shape. A bit weird, yeah. And actually, the subtly as well, the collar needs to change shape too. So I'm sure it's been done, and it's, again, everything's worth thinking about, but I think with all those in mind, then essentially it's a pretty tricky thing to do.
Okay. Yeah. Can you sew up buttonholes? Like if you have an invisible mender level of work, for example?
Well, yeah, actually.
Okay.
With certain cloths, if you did use an invisible mender, then it will be invisible.
Okay.
With some more finer cloths, again, if you look closely, you might
Might be
just
able to
see
see
the
it.
traces of where the invisible mender started and stopped.
Okay.
But yes, you're right. In some cases, buttonholes can be, removed. It's true.
Okay. Okay, great. Let's move on to trousers then, and then run through the same kind of series of things as to what's hard and what's easy. So I'm guessing the easy things on trousers, like we talked about before, is changing the waist, bringing that in and out, for example.
Yeah, I mean, that's trousers for you, really. Those are the biggest adjustments, is, the waist. You're going through the seat and through the fork as well.
Okay.
But in terms of the inlays that we leave in the pair of trousers, it's not just in the middle, it's actually on the outside as well.
Okay. So both seams running down the leg, you've got inlay in there as well.
So, quite large adjustments can be made that way. And also there's extra cloth left around the waistband too, so the rise of the trousers can be made higher or lower. And not necessarily all the way around, it could well be that, maybe just a little bit, just through the front or something like that, or just through the back in isolation.
So the seam running down the back of the trousers through the waist and the seat and the fork is pretty easy to do because you've got inlay in there, you just open up the seam, you make that change.
Yeah.
The legs is a little bit more work, but it's still perfectly possible.
Exactly. Whereas the outside seam is a little bit trickier because you have to take off the waistband to get into it, and also the pockets as well.
Right.
So that is extra work. It's, again, almost like taking apart a pair of trousers and remaking them. So in that sense, it's less of an adjustment. It's a real
remaking of something.
Real alteration.
How about, and talked about rise, presumably if you start changing the rise in a pair of trousers up or down, that's going to affect the pocket position.
It can do, and with certain pockets, that's fine. In terms of the side pockets, you can actually, if it's a really big adjustment, you can adjust the height of the pocket. The hip pockets,
move it up and down.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Because you're not really cutting into the cloth in that sense.
Right.
And there is still inlay in the top of that pocket, as well as there's usually a bit of extra zip hidden inside too. So if you did make the rise high, you've not got a zip that's kind of an inch lower down.
Okay.
The one thing that can't be adjusted is, again, because it's cut through the cloth, is the hip pocket. Right. So if you did really want to make a very high waisted pair of trousers lower, then it could come too close to the pocket.
Okay. So again, that's a question of proportion, like it is with the front of the jacket or the position of the pockets on the jacket.
And ditto, I mean, it's a very extreme thing, but if you did pick up a pair of trousers that was like totally huge on you and you really wanted to adjust them for you, just be conscious of where the pocket is. And like I was saying about my experience when I was a teenager,
hip pockets moving further in.
Pockets were practically, touching each other.
Just become one pocket. It's great.
Yeah, exactly. John used to go put a newspaper there. So, like I say, I was fine with it.
Yeah.
And, I was using cheap tailors, and so all good.
Yeah. Oh, actually, one thing, last thing on trousers, changing trousers from a turn-up or a cuff or vice versa, which of those is difficult or not?
Well, I mean, it's easy to take the turn-up off, to magic turn-ups on, a little bit more tricky.
Yeah.
So it would really be a case of finding the same cloth and kind of faking it.
Because actually you need, is it almost 3 times, isn't it, the amount of cloth you need of the centre of the turn-up? So you're never going to, if that's like a 5 centimetre turn-up, you need 15 centimetres extra cloth in there, which is not going to happen.
So that wouldn't necessarily be, wouldn't be left in a normal pair of trousers. So it would just get in the way and not fold or hang properly.
Okay.
So, but if the right cloth was found, then it's possible, but it's a very unusual thing. Yeah.
Okay. One thing I know we mentioned briefly earlier, but that's how much things can be changed. So what's the sort of maximum that you can make a weight change, say, around the waist of a jacket, for example? Yeah,
I mean, in principle, you can comfortably let out a coat, potentially 3 to 4 inches maximum. To take in, that depends on how large the coat was, because if it's a smaller coat, then you can only take as much as the pockets will allow, because they'll start to get too close or over the seam. Yeah. So, but in principle, you could imagine 3 to 4 inches either way.
But is that the amount of time? Amount is also, if you did more than that anyway, it'd start to change the proportions of the jacket. It would look slightly odd if you did more than that, right?
That's true too. So because all those adjustments are done essentially to the side and the back of the garment, that it's never going to really change the front. So if you're really trying to get the front to be closer, you end up twisting the coat, so which may not be comfortable to wear or may not look so good to the eye.
Is that the same on the trouser waist as well, about 3 inches, something like that?
Yeah, give or take. I think at the back of the trousers, there's usually easily about 2 to 3 inches that
Okay.
can be let out or taken in, and then through the sides, in total probably another inch or
Fine.
inch to inch and a half.
Okay.
So that's in total, that's quite a lot, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Either way.
Okay, and so I guess we've got a sense then of the different alterations of what's easy, hard, impossible, and the time involved in each of them. How does that reflect generally in the cost of those kind of things and what would cost the customer? Again, maybe on this jacket start about a simple thing like the side seams going up to completely remaking things.
Yeah, I mean, actually with tailoring, it's very difficult to sort of, not like a dry cleaners where you have a price list on the window and say, okay, it's £5 to do this and £20 to do that. For us, because every garment is so unique, you end up having to price it up as an individual thing.
Okay.
And quite often that's a conversation with the tailor just to work out exactly what needs to be done in order to kind of make that adjustment. Then you really have to consider the tailoring work that needs to be done. And actually a lot of that even involves hand finishing. So when you start to add up the time and the skill that's needed in order to kind of make those adjustments, then you can sort of see the value and how the pricing structure works.
So something like changing, say, the shoulders, changing the structure of those, so the padding and the finishing, for example, that's going to be a few hundred or something.
Yeah, it could well be, but in terms of the proportion of what a new coat would cost, and the fact that you're bringing something back to life that wouldn't be worn, then you can see the value in it.
Yeah, it's interesting on the cost of alterations. I think some people are still under the impression that a Savile Row suit, once you buy it, then you get sort of free maintenance for life in terms of looking after it and pressing it and alterations and everything else. But I guess that comes from a slightly different period, doesn't it?
Potentially, or maybe just a misrepresentation of what that was about. I think for us, yes, we do build up a relationship with our customers and we want to see our garments coming back because we know that they're being worn. Yeah. So there is an element of upkeep and, we will say to customers within the first year, to clean it, to make some minor adjustments, that's on the house. And that's just for us to make sure, one, that the suit that was fresh out the door that we were happy to see go is still good. Yeah. But it's also just to encourage customers to sort of see their garments in that way. If they've come in to order a couple of new suits, but they've bought some minor alterations to do, I'm happy to put those on their house because it just
part of that relationship.
And it's just good service too.
Yeah.
And it feels.
I guess it comes from perhaps it used to be 50 years ago, you had people who made all their suits here and they had made several things a year, and therefore a lot of the alterations or maintenance was part of that because they were a good long-term loyal customer as well.
No, for sure, and it's like I say, it's just good to know that the garments have come back here, so we know we're doing the correct work that needs to be done on it.
Looking
and again,
after it well.
It sounds awful, but there's nothing worse seeing when someone's had some alterations done emergency by a hotel or dry cleaners somewhere, and it comes back, and you just kind of open up, and things are being chopped into, and machining has cut into the cloth, and the life has been pressed out of it. So that's the kind of thing that can really sort of destroy a garment as well. So I think just understanding, one, how a garment's been made, and then how the correct upkeep can really give it longevity.
Okay. Out of interest, how many times can some of these alterations be made? So if you're changing the suit, trousers on a suit, for example, to take it in and out, presumably you can't do that again and again and again forever before it starts to weaken the cloth.
I had two answers to that. One, yes, in theory, as long as, and that's the good thing about wool actually, because wool is, loosely woven, that there's no essential damage being done when it's being hand sewn together or unpicked. But you're right, I guess over a period of time, if, just due to longevity and wear and tear, that it might get thin, then it'll become more fragile. Okay. Certain places that could be replaced, like we were saying in the fork of the trousers, or even like whole sections potentially, like a new top collar and things like that. So there are some things that we can keep good garments going if that's really what they want to be done. So
Okay. Great. Thank you very much, Davide. Thanks for joining us.
No, pleasure.
Cheers.